I was saying that I didn't hear you, and it appears it's only the politicians that have taken the lead in talking about whether or not there will be taxes increased, maintained, or new taxes introduced. Now, our medium-term revenue strategy has some very indications about what's going to happen. In all, Ghana between 2024 next year and 2027 will be hoping to introduce 113 different administrative reforms and also legislative reforms in the taxation space alone and the revenue structuring space alone. The idea is to meet the same target of 20% tax to GDP, but the very different ones. And I'll come to the direct and indirect taxes and what we are telling people we will do. And as to whether the reality in today's budget reading will reflect what our medium-term revenue strategy is supposed to be. But from where you sit, are we going to have taxes increased or new taxes introduced or current taxes reduced?
Okay, so I'll put the conversation broadly in terms of the concerns that we solicited.
Because you don't want to share what you have heard from the grapevine with us.
Arising from concerns that we got from business leaders in our pre-budget stakeholder engagement. So there are about 4 or 5 key concerns.
Okay.
The first one is increasing the tax burden on businesses and individuals.
Okay. So
we seen instances where the PAYE, that's employment taxes, from 25%, 30%, 35%. Now we've got corporate tax. Our current corporate tax is 25%. It compares well with Algeria and Ivory Coast. But Kenya and Nigeria have got 30% corporate tax. So if the minister is trying to be bold, he will just say that, look, go, your neighbors have got 30%. Why are you 25%? Let's do 30%. So it's likely that we will fall on increasing existing taxes. So the rate on them will increase. So one of them is the corporate tax, which I said is 25%, 30%. We also have reintroduction of taxes that were...
The corporate tax, is it
it's 25%, 25%. Right? And then it's likely to go 30% because our peers, Nigeria and Kenya, are 30%. So it's possible. I'm not saying that.
There was a reason why we kept it at 25%, or even reduced it when they proposed previously to not actually increase it. That reason was that we needed to stimulate some growth in the economy and do more production. Is it not so?
It is not the case that when you reduce taxes, you exert compliance. And that's something that it's a fundamental principle. So you can reduce your tax rate from 25% to 5%. That does not necessarily mean that the people who were not paying will start paying. Because our tax structure and our system is such that the faithful few, we call them, are the ones paying all the time. So you will still be taxing the same pool at 5% instead of taxing the same pool at 25%. So if you broaden the tax net, then reducing the rates.
Yeah, the other side of that is that the faithful few could also
be tired.
And they could begin to have more liabilities than expected. And so if, say, it was 20 or 15%, there would not be the need to actually engage in a bit of avoidance. But if it is at 30, then you draw their attention to how about we play along? How about we also make sure that we avoid a few taxes that we can avoid so we don't pay more? You would not disagree with that?
Yeah, so I think the point clearly is that what taxes are we implementing? How are we going about them? So for generally, the principle of taxation is efficiency in collection and efficiency in application. So how many people are paying the taxes? How can we get a lot more people into the tax bracket? Which is why for taxation, there are 3 ways that you implement them. You first enforce existing laws. We've talked about property taxes and all. How many of us have paid our property taxes this year? Next year, you talk about the same thing. So we are not enforcing the existing laws. Yeah. Secondly, you amend existing laws. So we are saying corporate tax 20%, 25%. It may go to 30%. It's an amendment of an existing law. VAT was 12.5%, it went 15%. It's an amendment of existing law. Introduction of new taxes. That's the last part that businesses are not interested in. Because when you do that, you create a lot of uncertainty. Businesses are budgeting for 2024, and they are budgeting with the current rates. Now you are introducing new e-levy, you are introducing corporate tax. There will be a new tax that will be introduced, pollution, sanitation. It creates a lot of uncertainty. So businesses are worried about that.
So in your forum, were the business more amenable to pay increase, say, corporate tax?
They are interested in the first two, which is first enforce existing taxes.
Okay.
Bring more people into the tax brackets. You can't be taxing the faithful few and keep taxing them. They get tired, like you rightly said.
Yeah.
Secondly, if you want to do anything at all, you amend existing laws. Or the taxes that were abolished on account of maybe e-levy coming, like road tolls and all. You drive through, the road we are using has deteriorated. You want it to improve, yet you are not paying taxes on them. So reintroduction of taxes that have been there, and not introduction of new taxes that really affect our business. And I can give you a very good example. Our corporate tax rate is 25%, but effectively some institutions are paying 35% because financial institutions over and above the 25% are paying growth and sustainability. They are paying previously what we call national reconstruction levy. They are paying financial sector recovery levy. If you put the composite of that together, financial institutions are paying about 35% in Ghana. So we have to look at how our tax structures are and reform them. VAT at 15%, and yet we have other levies that you cannot claim. And those increases the cost. So we are doing what we call tax on tax. Businesses are concerned about indirect taxes especially, and they want a revision of the tax and the way we are applying the VAT system. Why? Because when you increase VAT and other indirect taxes, you are also affecting inflation. Today, inflation has dropped from 38% in the previous month to now 35%. That is a remarkable progress. But if you want to see that downward trend, we have to avoid the introduction of indirect taxes because those taxes will be passed on to the consumer, which will then increase inflation.
Now, I need to bring to your attention these, in the medium-term revenue strategy, these are policy reforms that government is seeking to do in the indirect tax area, which you just mentioned. It says here, align excise duty rates such that similar products attract the same rates. The second one is align the exemption and relief provisions in the customs tariff with the VAT Act. Review the VAT registration threshold requirement. Review VAT exemption on the supply of residential properties. Review VAT associated levies on taxable supplies to allow input deductibility of the levies. Review VAT exemptions to make them more efficient and less distortionary. And review the headline rate of communications services tax. Complete harmonization on the rate of excise duty on tobacco products with WHO recommendations and ECOWA protocols. There are 3 more. Review excise tax regime and introduce a hybrid tax, that's into bracket, ad valorem, and also specific taxes on spirits, wines, sugar sweetened products, and beers, adjusting for inflation periodically. Expand the excise tax regimes to cover other products like selected cosmetics, weapons, and ammunition. There's the develop an automatic adjustment formula for the rates of the special petroleum tax, energy sector levies, and excise duties. And the last one on the indirect tax rate is reduce reliance on wage-based taxes and shift focus to consumption-based taxes. This is what government says we have agreed to do between 2024 and 2027. Do these things generally suggest a possible increase in the taxation regime we have now?
So the list that you've mentioned, you can classify them in 2 broad terms. So the first one is the exemption regime.
Yeah.
We have to review our tax exemption regime. So we provided exemption to some industries historically because we were expecting investors to put money there. Yeah. Today, we have found those investors. There is no need for you to continue to keep those exemption regime. The problem we have with our taxes in Ghana is that we introduce taxes with sunset clauses, but the sun never set on those clauses. And COVID. You are still paying for COVID. Do you have COVID? So those sunset provisions must be enforced. So our exemption regime has to be reviewed, and it has to be reviewed to make them comply with the current operations. So for instance, we're still granting exemptions to industries like the oil and gas, mining, etc. Our mining sector and oil and gas sector has developed, it has matured. There are new sectors. A very good example is renewable energy. You have a client who is trying to do a renewable energy, and then there are import duties on all the panels, solar panels that they are importing, and all the things that they need to build the solar plant. And then we ask for exemption. The argument there is that, look, some of the products they were importing, for instance, there was alcohol there. The argument of the revenue authority is that they have other uses. So until you prove to me that when you import that alcohol, it will go straight to the solar plants, I will not give you that exemption.
Okay.
So that's why we have to review. So that when you review it, it makes it compliant to the industry, where the person importing that alcohol, it is tagged in such a way that that person cannot take it to the shop or the blue kiosk, but he will take it straight to the misapply.
Yeah.
So that review is there. And then the other thing is where we have a distortion in application of our taxes. So today you have the VAT you pay and you have other levies. Those other levies you cannot claim. We have what we call input and output VAT. If you pay VAT of 15% on the goods that you have bought, and then you are also charging someone 15%, at the end of the month, you have to do a netting off. The taxes you have paid, the VAT you have paid, is let's say 100 million. You have also charged somebody 80 million. You are supposed to pay, or you are supposed to be refunded 20 million. That's the difference. But the levies that we have, the COVID levy, list all of them. You can't claim them under this regime. So what it means is that if I'm a businessman, those levies are passed on to the consumer.
I see.